Persons who have not committed any crimes under Ghanaian law and who are not Ghanaian nationals cannot be brought into Ghana without the consent of the individuals concerned.
So, was President Mahama's government wrong to accept West African nationals deported from the US?
The answer lies in a purported secretive memorandum of understanding that is now under legal scrutiny at Ghana's Supreme Court.
So, who approved the deal?
And how about claims of outright violation of human rights meted on the deportees?
Immediately the flight lands, armed military officials come onto the flight to remove these individuals. In initial cases, they were sent to a military base outside of the capital.
But some Ghanaians cautiously welcome the decision to accept West African nationals deportees.
If they are going to abide by our laws, I think they should be allowed to come into this country. But they can't come here and misbehave.
So Ghana is just one of the several African countries being used by President Trump's administration to speed up deportations. But how legal is this deportation scheme?
That is our focus on today's show.
Hi.
Hello and a very warm welcome. This is Under the Baobab and my name is George Okachi.
George is always staring at me when the show starts. I am Mimi Mefoneu and welcome to Under the Baobab, where we make complex issues very personal.
And we do that every week. We bring you honest conversations with leaders, policymakers and voices shaping Africa's future. So what we ask from you is to subscribe and be part of the conversation.
It's very important, and please subscribe. We want to see the comments coming in. So George, deportations are rising globally, and we are seeing also African countries involved in deals with the United States of America.
It's a new shift in this deportation, craze, whereby countries who are deporting are using third parties. They're calling it third-party deportation scheme. Whereby, a country sends, deportees to another country, which is not their original country.
We know, of course, that many human rights organizations have called it unlawful, illegal, because of how the process is carried out and how these deportees are actually treated. So Ghana has actually found itself right in the middle of this shift. In recent weeks, several West African migrants have been deported from the United States of America to Ghana. Recently, we have been talking about the case of Cameroon as well, and under what the government has described as bilateral agreement between Washington, D.C. and Accra. And when you also see the situation of Cameroon, you see that there's a memorandum of understanding between the United States and Cameroon.
Yes.
But we have a lot of reservations from human rights organizations.
Yes,
Judge.
there are, of course, there are cases of claims of violation of human rights and also due process not being followed, like these memorandums of understanding not being ratified by the country's parliament, for instance.
Because there are a lot of questions being asked. How transparent are these deportations being conducted? So there's a lot of question about, the violation of the constitution when it comes to Ghana, and also the problem of transparency.
Yes, and of course, in the Ghanaian situation, the case is at the Supreme Court, and the Attorney General says that the government will defend itself because the government insists that it was right in signing and entering into this memorandum of understanding. But to help us get into the crux of what's really happening, we spoke to Oliver Barker-Vormawor, and Oliver Barker is a lawyer and an activist and a leading figure at Democracy Hub, one of the groups challenging the deportation agreement in court.
So his organization has been working tirelessly to defend some of these migrants. But it was very important for us to find out from him, actually to know how these migrants are received when they arrive Ghana. Are they just coming in as normal citizens? Are they received as, are they received properly, decently as human beings? Let's hear what the lawyer told us.
So on our end, for instance, in terms of the Ghanaian administration, there's no information provided to the public or to any interested parties, be it lawyers or families of the deported individuals, when deportation flights land. And so, for instance, in our case, we have had to rely on third-party trackers in the U.S. who track deportation flights, who can then alert us that a deportation flight is arriving in Ghana, and then we can then be able to engage in administrative systems. Now, typically, from the testimonies of those who have come in that we have had to represent, immediately the flight lands, armed military officials come onto the flight to remove these individuals, put them onto a flight, And in initial cases, they were sent to a military base outside of the capital. Now, for others that arrived, they were put into a holding cell at the airport, again transported out of there by national security, police, detectives, and immigration officials into a holding location. If anything, the only consistent thing is that the government is doing everything to be able to shroud the process in a great deal of secrecy.
Among the migrants that you've represented so far, do any of them feel settled or safe in Ghana?
All the individuals that have come into Ghana are West African nationals, which means that they have protections not under domestic Ghanaian law, but also under the ECOWAS regional human rights framework. Now, what this means is that this triggers a heightened obligation in terms of how these individuals are treated. But this hasn't been the case, in fact. In one instance of a Sierra Leonean lady who was dragged on the floor, even with us protesting as lawyers, sent into a plane, the High Commissioner for Sierra Leone had, in fact, in our conversations with him, indicated to us that in his conversations with the Foreign Minister of Ghana, that Ghana had given every diplomatic assurances that these individuals would be given an opportunity to resettle and protected while in Ghana. But no single individual, apart from one, was allowed to remain in Ghana. So clearly, there's no attempt, or at least Ghana does not understand its role in the process as being protective or respective of the rights of the individuals that are brought into the country.
From what we've been discussing so far and what you have seen on the ground, how prepared or unprepared are these governments, particularly the government of Ghana, to receive people who are not even their own nationals?
Well, based on our information that we have and also information provided that we have been able to piece together from those who were held in detention, one, it starts from the legal level. The legal level is that when the government went into the agreement, it did not seek proper advice as to whether or not it is competent to do so without reference to Parliament. And this is the scope of the matter that is currently before the Supreme Court for the Supreme Court to rule on. The second level is in terms of the reception and where the individuals were kept. In fact, the ladies that were brought in were denied access to hygiene, or there were none on site available, female hygiene products. Again, it doesn't reveal a great deal of preparation. Thirdly, on the third level is on the diplomatic level, that all the other countries that are affected by this within the ECOWAS region were completely blindsided by this. None of them were aware, and there were no diplomatic efforts to be able to have conversations with them that the government was intending to receive their nationals, and for which reason they would require them to step in. In our conversations with various diplomatic representations in the country, many of them have raised serious concerns about how their nationals have been treated.
Wow.
I mean, his description, and especially when he points out on, outright violation of human rights and the preparedness of Ghana to receive these deportees is disturbing, I must admit, Mimi.
Right.
But what is, forthcoming is that the opaqueness of how the entire memorandum of understanding was entered between the U.S. government and the Ghanaian government. The government insists that, of course, it is a memorandum of understanding. There is no need of Parliament to ratify it.
Memorandum of understanding that the people don't even know what is inside that memorandum of understanding. And I can't help but just wonder. Ghana is a country, of course, democracy can never be at its best in Africa, but this is a country that when we are talking about Ghana, we are talking about democracy, freedom of expression, human rights,
rule of law.
Yes. But we are seeing people that are being illegally, some sort of, deported from the US and received in Ghana. These people are also not properly treated in Ghana. So I can't help but wonder why are these legal frameworks not being respected? Why is Ghana actually receiving some of these deportees from the US when the terms of agreement are not really clear even for the public?
Yeah, but they would argue that it is clear. They have a memorandum of understanding.
The memorandum of understanding should not be a secret. It should be something that people are aware. You know that if you're going to Ghana, this is what awaits you. Would you be sent back to your country where you don't even feel safe? For instance, someone left Cameroon maybe under political persecution, for instance, and is sent back maybe to Ghana and could eventually be shipped back to Cameroon. That means that the person's safety is in jeopardy. So how safe are these people in the first place? And how safe... We don't know also the background of some of these migrants, where they are coming from or where they are being sent back from the US. How safe is Ghana with also these deportees coming in? So it's a two-way kind of situation to look at here.
Yeah, and when you spoke to Oliver, is this the core of the crux of their legal challenge against this deportation?
Exactly. I really wanted to understand the legal framework that is involved in the whole deportation deal between Ghana and the US. Let's hear what he told us.
So one of the main arguments we are making is that persons who have not committed any crimes under Ghanaian law and who are not Ghanaian nationals cannot be brought into Ghana without the consent of the individuals concerned. So that the individuals are not picked up and shipped to Ghana as cargo without any regard for their own personal views on the matter. So that's the first thing. The second one is, having been brought into Ghana, what are the minimum core responsibility obligations that the government has vis-a-vis these individuals? For persons who are not Ghanaian, there's no legitimate legal interest for the government to force their coming into Ghana. And that's where we think is the missing piece in this conversation.
What do you mean by that exactly? Do you mean the government is having a particular kind of agenda when it comes to this deportation deal between Ghana and the US?
What happens is that, to think about secrecy in terms of, to remember that the individuals informed are persons who have been detained and in custody of the state, which immediately they are into Ghanaian airspace, triggers constitutional or human rights obligations under domestic law, because everybody in Ghana has human rights protections. When we immediately contact the immigration and security officials to be able to confirm the detainees that have been brought in, their location, there's absolutely silence. There's in fact in many instances denial that in fact these individuals are in Ghana. So what we know then is that this is all calculated to be able to obstruct the ability to seek and obtain effective legal representation and effective assistance in terms of the condition in which they are placed, in fact.
Interesting.
So Oliver's argument is twofold. First, the agreement itself may be unconstitutional. Second, even if it exists, Mimi, individuals cannot be transferred without legal process. That is what he's doubling down on.
And the question is whether there's actually legal process in place. And that shifts the conversation from migration politics to state power, right? And whether executive or authority is being stretched beyond its limits. But the conversation is not just between us and the lawyer,
yes,
who is in charge of defending some of these migrants. We always take the conversation to the people out there to also hear from the people on the streets. Isaac Kalechi, our colleague in Ghana, also spoke to people to hear from them what they think about this deal between the US and Ghana.
There should be a reason why they are being deported, because you can't just get up and then deport someone. They deport them based on what? They don't having what? Maybe documents that should allow them stay or live in that country. If they are going to abide by our laws, I think they should be allowed to come into this country. But they can't come here and misbehave.
Yeah, I think it's a good thing, because if Ghana can accept it, that means it's a good thing. So I will encourage other Africans to do the same. You understand? Because it's a peaceful country and they wouldn't want to bring anything that would tarnish the image of Ghana. So I don't think it's a threat.
I think there's a reason why they are being deported. So if it's for a good reason, they wouldn't have deported them. I think it's not bad if they are protected and they are accepted in the country, because we are all human. So yeah, human first.
Yeah, Mimi, what I'm hearing from the sounds from Ghana and our people from Ghana is that deportation itself is not inherently a bad thing. It's
but
a
I'm
way
sure
of
they will
countries
change their mind when they listen to the lawyer.
Yeah, but it's something that many countries are using to enforce, migration rules, where it is impossible to actually deport, someone who is maybe legally protected.
My question is, why is the U.S. not sending these migrants directly to their countries? Why should they use Ghana as, a third-party country to send out the deportees from the U.S.? Why should they use Cameroon? Why should they use Ghana?
Yes.
Why are they not sending the migrants directly to? Because eventually,
yes,
those that came from the lawyer just talked about the Sierra Leonean should be eventually sent to Sierra Leone.
To Sierra Leone, yes.
There was a Zimbabwean who arrived, people who arrived from the U.S. to Cameroon, and some of them were eventually sent back to their countries of origin. Why is the US not doing that directly? What is behind the story behind this deal?
It's a way to circumvent the law, Mimi, because there's some people, generally, you cannot deport them from, the particular country. Therefore, this is a scheme that is, used to ease, this deportation.
There's a lot of question mark around this scheme, George, because if there was transparency, if it was something right, the US would send them directly to their countries of origin. The fact that they have to use another country, these are not non-Africans. They are Africans.
Yes.
If you cannot send them to their countries of origin directly, you have to use a country like Ghana.
But you see, for instance, someone from Nigeria being deported to Ghana, they would question, okay, it is unsafe for them to go back to Nigeria. But do they have a family close to Ghana or somewhere else they can be sent?
But
that is the argument they are making.
Look at how they are treated when they arrive Ghana. They are under serious security scrutiny and they are detained, they are handcuffed. The lawyer is saying it. They are not treated as free citizens.
I totally agree with you.
And they are sent back to their countries. So they are not treated as Ghanaians because they are not Ghanaians.
Yeah, definitely. For that, I agree with you. If there is any case of human rights violation, then it should be stopped. But the fact remains that these people are not just being deported for the sake of being deported. There is a underlying reason why they're being deported. Maybe the process and the means of deportation is what should be questioned, actually, Mimi.
Right. That's why I wanted to find out from the lawyer. And what happens if Ghana becomes a transit point for returning them to countries where they have, where it's documented that they have fear of being persecuted. They are not safe, to go back to their countries of origin. What if they are sent back to maybe Zimbabwe and they are not safe to go back to Zimbabwe? What if they are sent back to Cameroon or maybe to Sierra Leone and they are not safe to be back in their country? That's what I was discussing with the lawyer. Let's hear what he had to tell us.
So essentially, a lot of the people who are arriving were persons who had withholder from removal from the US, which is a protection that prevents their being sent to their countries of origin. Because the US courts have found that there's probable claims for, say, maybe torture or persecution or political or sexual persecution and all kinds of forms. Which means is that these individuals require protection from their home countries. However, from the Ghanaian authorities' perspective, it seems that their understanding of whatever agreement they have reached with the US is that Ghana is supposed to be a transit point. So once these individuals arrived, they are detained, and then all attempts are made by the authorities to deport them from Ghana to their countries of origin. And so effectively becomes a way in which they are assisting the US authorities to circumvent US court orders by returning these persons to their countries of origin, where they have fear-based reasons from not wanting to return.
And since you've touched on that aspect, I just wanted to find out, you are defending these migrants, but who exactly are you defending them against? Is it the government of Ghana, or is it against the US government, or both?
So many of them, before they are deported, had active cases going on in the US courts. And so once they arrive and we're able to establish their identity, our first job is to be able to find their lawyers and inform them that their clients have been brought to Ghana, because this is happening in a great deal of secrecy, that they themselves are not aware of the removal of their clients. Our focus then is not to get into the representations in the US. And so our representation is vis-a-vis how they are handled and treated by Ghanaian government, and also by the fact that the Ghana government went to enter into such an agreement with the US to find it being declared as both unconstitutional and also, again, violating international law. So that's the focus of our work in representing the migrant, the deportees that are brought in.
So it'll be interesting to find out what is the end goal of the lawsuit that you filed. If it succeeds, is it going to stop Ghana from receiving flights, or the US from repatriating people to Ghana?
If the full arguments that we have made before the court succeed, one of the orders we are seeking is to suspend the implementation of the agreement while the case is ongoing, because there's no way in which it is protective of rights, and inability to protect rights must mean that governmental action must cease. But also we are seeking to vindicate and redeem the way in which those who have been brought in have been treated in connection with their violations of their rights and their right to dignity, which we are hoping that the government would pay compensation for these individuals. So it's to stop future conduct, but also to remediate and repair past misbehavior.
You know, Barker raises very serious allegations because it suggests that Ghana could, in effect, be enabling returns to countries where individuals claim fear of persecution.
Right.
But Mimi, you know, on the flip of, you know, the entire situation, there are cases I've heard of people lying about, you know, their political persecution status and you know, as a means of them seeking for refuge in other countries.
Well, you wouldn't say they are lying, because I am standing here. I'm also like a political refugee in Germany because of, you know, the political situation in the country. It doesn't allow, you know, freedom of expression. Journalists that are, you know, like independent reporters, like journalists that call the government, question government and call for accountability. They are often... Cameroon, for instance, they are often unsafe. I have colleagues who have been killed. I have colleagues who have been detained and killed in detention. So I wouldn't say that political persecution sometimes are false. You know, I can't talk for others, but I'm speaking now for myself as a political refugee in Germany. So
and that's true, Mimi. That's true.
Imagine a situation where the authorities here in Germany have to send me back to Ghana, for instance, and I could be eventually sent to Cameroon. What that means for someone like myself.
That can be very dreadful and detrimental, of course, into your, you know, human rights, you know, protection. But the question is, in instances where people are outrightly lying about their status to seek for refuge in a country, what happens then?
It's not just about human rights. It's not just about violating someone's rights. It's also about the person's safety. How safe is someone if you're deported from a country where you feel like you're safe in this country, you're deported back to your country? How safe are you? And also, how safe is the country receiving a non-national? So it's like I said in the beginning, it's two ways.
It's definitely two ways traffic, Mimi, but I was just trying to, you know, invite a conversation about cases where there is, you know, claims of, you know, doubts if indeed you are a political, you know, asylum seeker.
Yes, but until you wear the shoes, you won't know where it pinches. And of course, when the conversation gets tough, and
here under the Baobab, we, you know, retreat and we get to know our guests on a personal level, and we do that under the rapid fire segment.
What is the most underrated Ghanaian dish?
Wache. Wache, rice and beans, which looks like the rice and beans in Jamaica. Wache.
Accra or tamale?
Tamale for me. Tamale.
If you had 24 hours to rewrite one national policy, which of them would it be?
It would be the prison conditions and the criminal justice system in the way in which it violates rights.
Okay. One thing that Ghana must never compromise on.
Its values and commitment to democracy within the region.
And who is that one Ghanaian leader, past or present, that you genuinely admire?
Kwame Nkrumah.
Oh, interesting. And what is that one thing that you would say to the Ghanaian president if you had the opportunity to sit down with him?
That African countries are not shithole countries. We are individuals with dignity who believe in the right of every individual to freedom and justice.
When things get overwhelming, how do you wind down?
I read.
If a Ghanaian, for instance, was sent back to another African country, what are you going to do as a lawyer?
I think the first thing we'll do is to knock on the doors of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs to be able to provide protection and receive the Ghanaian back home immediately.
If at all the Ghanaian will be safe to back home. But what is your favorite Ghanaian food, George?
Wache, like the lawyer. And
Are you sure?
Yes, I was in Ghana and I tried it. It is super delicious.
I like the fufu and the soup. It's very delicious. But third country removers are not entirely new. US has used them sporadically, you know, in the past, like historical expulsions or deals with countries refusing returns. But the 2025 scale and secrecy marked the escalation in Trump's mass deportation push. And
yes.
It's something that we've not seen before.
Yeah, we've not seen it before, but what is, you know, enabling this is what they're now calling, you know, MOUs, Memorandum of Understanding.
Secret MOUs.
Yes, you've insisted that they are secret, but there are some that are already, you know, in public, like what we saw in Rwanda and the UK, which was, you know, scrutinized also under, you know, UK's legal processes. But But what they are saying, if there is an MOU, this suffices. There is no need of, people doing a referendum about an MOU to agree that this is how the country should deal with this particular issue.
Yes, about Ghana, it has received at least 42 to 56 West African deportees in initial batches from September 2025 onwards. And this week, February 2026, we also got reports that Cameroon also received a good number of deportees from the US. January 2026 as well, it was also reported that Cameroon received a good number of deportees from the US. So it's something that is ongoing within these countries. MOUs that are not made public, but people putting, there's a lot of question mark around these MOUs.
Yes, but the question is, what is Ghana receiving from this type of a deal? Or Cameroon, for instance?
That's a very important question. And I wanted to understand from the lawyer what Ghana stands to gain from a deal like this. Is it monetary or is it just a deal, an agreement? Let's find out.
So in the beginning, the government was claiming some moral benefit. The moral benefit being that it is a country that believes in Pan-Africanism. It has a moral responsibility to extend refuge to Pan-African and African brothers who are lost and kept in US cell detention for a long time. And so it was using that kind of rhetoric. But of course, that was challenged immediately, and that fell apart when the government then later on considered that it had entered into an agreement with the US to seek visa restrictions. And so this is a very selfish attempt which uses human beings as pawns to be able to get some visa accommodations from the US government. We think that diminishes Ghana's standing in the global community, and it's fast very shameful to act in that manner.
So what about you? Critics are also saying that, or thinking that you are defending them for fame or financial benefits, because why did you not try to see into it that they do not leave the US at all or in the first place? What are you benefiting from this?
So the first thing is that, like I indicated, a lot of them have US counsel who are representing them in US courts. And in fact, their removal from the US was violative of their right to due process in those countries. But there's a particular regime in the US now that has very little regard for constitutional and rights protections for individuals concerned. And so we, as a law firm in Ghana, do not have representation before the US courts, and we do not represent them in that regard. Now, our representation kicks in when the persons, without any work we have done, have been brought, and without their will, has been brought into Ghana. Next one, as I've indicated, our representation to these individuals who are in distress has been pro bono, that we are acting in the public interest, and that all the cost of our representation have been borne by us as a law firm, as private individuals. We have not received any grants, we are not being paid in any manner, but acting from the conscience and the responsibility that the legal profession imposes on us as persons who must see to the cessation of violation of rights. And that's our job, and we'll continue to do that job without distraction.
So would you say that this legal team has done a good job if these people are not sent back to the US and are not sent back to their countries of origin?
For me, and that's a very interesting question, Mimi, it will be a success if indeed the memorandums of understanding conform to the law, because that is the challenge that Oliver and the team are trying to push with. And also that this memorandum of understanding contains rules and principles that adhere to protection of human rights.
Yes,
of
because
the
I
people
only
being
have
deported.
the impression that they are just fighting to question the legality for Ghana's this deal between Ghana and the US. And also they're trying to look at, whether their rights have been violated.
Yes.
But the real debate here is, should they have been sent to Ghana in the first place? Should they even be in Ghana in the first place? I think that's also another important part of the conversation.
Definitely. And deportation is not just about borders.
It's about power. Who decides who belongs, who gets protection, and who becomes negotiable.
Yes, as global migration rules tighten, African countries may increasingly find themselves being pulled into migration enforcement system designed elsewhere.
So the question remains, is Ghana asserting sovereignty here or trading it?
And beyond Ghana, this conversation speaks to Africans everywhere. If these are the conversations you care about, honest and comfortable and necessary, stay with us.
And please subscribe to Under the Baobab on our YouTube channel, where we air this program on a weekly basis on DW Africa. And where else can we watch or see Under the Baobab?
Of course, Under the Baobab can be followed through Spotify and Apple Podcast as we continue to slow down, ask harder questions, and make complex issues personal.
And until next week, my name is Mimi Mefoneu.
And I'm Jojo Kachi. Many thanks for watching and listening.